Hello everyone, it's Sherry Truler with Red Apple Auctions. Thank you for joining me. It is just after an auction. I've gotten home from doing an auction with a fashion show attached to it, and I thought it'd be a great time while I'm all dolled up here to go ahead and give you a tip with regards to your charity auction. Now, if you've spent any time following me at all, whether you've attended a webinar or 10 different presentations, I'm sure that you have heard me talk about my analogy of how a three-legged stool ties into your benefit auction. This is my trifecta, if you will, of how a benefit auction gets planned. And that three-legged stool is centered around three core components. It's centered around item acquisition, it's centered around audience development, and the third one is auction operations. And you've got to work on all three of those to have a great event. So the tip that I'm about to share with you falls into audience development, getting the right people at your event, the right butts in seats, right? It's not a matter of having 500 people. It's about having 500 of the right people. If not, you may as well have 200 people. I'd rather have you 200 right people than 500 of which 200 are right and 300, really shouldn't be there. It's about getting the right butts in seats, the right people who are committed to the cause and who have money to spend. That's how you're going to have a great fundraiser. So with that in mind, I want to share a couple of quick stories and then we'll wrap this all up at the end with the information I want to share. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I had attended a party. It was during Halloween week, and it was for being put on by Women in Film and Video here in Washington, D.C., at the D.C. chapter of WIF. And they were holding this Halloween party in a huge, enormous mansion down in Washington, D.C. It's one of those interesting places that just goes on, and you turn a corner and there'd be other rooms, and each one is very eccentrically decorated. And so I was making my way through the mansion because this is the first time I'd been there, and there'd be a few people here and there that I'd stop and chat with. And I got into one of the rooms, and there was some food there, some M&Ms and I don't know, sweet things or so forth. And so I sat down because at this point I was kind of tired, and there was a gentleman who was just sitting kind of across the coffee table. And so he and I struck up a conversation. And it turns out that his wife is a filmmaker and was a member of WIF. And so she was off chatting with her friends and so forth. And he decided to park himself there in that space. So as I visited with him, I found out that he's the president of a company, and it was a government contractor that made, as I recall, a Jeep. And it was a special type of Jeep because it was very difficult for these Jeeps to flip over. They were very sturdy and wouldn't cause a lot of damage, and therefore would protect humans better. And so he was telling me a bit about this, and then he asked what I did, and I told him that I was a benefit auctioneer, and he said, well, what is that? And he had no idea what that was. And so I explained what a benefit auction was and how it worked and how a silent auction worked, and all of this was completely new to him. But he was incredibly charming, and later I got to meet his wife, and they were a very fun couple. Okay, so that's the first story. Now let me share another story, and then again we'll wrap this up. So in early April, I was working an auction out in Arizona, and as I like to do after my auctions is I make my way around the room and thank everybody for contributing to the cause and for coming, and if they won one of the live auction items, we talk a little bit about that and so forth. And as I was doing that, there was a couple at one of the tables, and he said, do you ever make it to Memphis? And I said, well, actually, I've never been to Memphis, but serendipitously, I will be there in 2 weeks speaking. And he said, well, we're out of Memphis. So he was in Arizona attending this event, but he and his wife live in Memphis. And so he gave me his card and he says, give us a call when you're out there, and we'd love to hang out with you and get to know you better and all that. So when I went out to Memphis, it worked out perfectly because they weren't traveling. They were both there. And so we went out to a fabulous dinner there in Memphis. They treated me to that. And it come to find out he is the president of a company there in Memphis. Now they're not from Memphis. They were transferred there with the business a couple of years ago, and his wife had also had a big career as well. And so just a really lovely evening. These were gregarious, fun-loving people. They like to entertain. They're just just a great couple. And here he is, president of this company and relatively new to that city, just 2 years in. So what does this have to do with your auction? Well, remember how I talked about the trifecta? We've got items, we've got audience, we've got operations, and this is in audience. When you're trying to develop your auction, you want to have people who have disposable income and who can be committed to your cause. And in both of those cases right there, were a couple of people who really hadn't been tapped for anything like that. Two different individuals, both presidents of companies, big companies, and they'd never been asked to attend a benefit auction. Now, you got to believe that they live in a place, a neighborhood where they have neighbors and that people might be getting to know them in the community and so forth, but yet no one had invited them to participate in a cause that was of concern to them. And I think it's important as you are going about planning your auction to remember that there are people in your community who could and should be attending your event, and they just haven't been asked. I think that sometimes we go back to that same well, those same people, and we have our supporters and we know that they're going to support us, and that's great. You want to have those at your benefit auction. But when you're looking to expand that pool, you want to have those 300 people in the room who are great people. And that's two examples of people that I just randomly met that would be fabulous to have at a benefit auction. They've got disposable income, they're fun loving. Those are the kinds of bidders that you like to have at your event. So as you go out, keep this in mind. Don't be afraid to share your passion. Don't be afraid to shine your light, if you will, your enthusiasm about the cause that's important to you. Because when people go to a benefit auction and they're going with your enthusiasm as part of their constitution, if you will, they're going to have a great time. You're going to make sure that they're going to be taken care of. You've invited them, and they're going to contribute to the cause as well and could become big donors. Okay, so there's your tip for this week. Again, I'm Sherry Truler with Red Apple Auctions. You can catch a lot more information, including a free gift called the Auction Item Guide. This year it's called What Sold Swell in 2012. It's the top 100 items I sold for overvalue in the auctions I worked last year, and that's totally free on my website. All you got to do is put in your email and it's immediately sent out to you. Thanks for watching, and as always, good luck to you in your benefit auction.